Okay, we've reached the final session of the day, and my goodness, it's a good one. To warm themselves up for this, two of our speakers have been locked away in a room for 3 hours this afternoon discussing three of the most pertinent topics that a global media director needs to know and understand in media. So they are coming up here full of ideas, full of inspiration, and definitely full of education for you guys. So we talked about the bold and brave, and it was lovely that Kristen mentioned it again earlier. We are going to look at how brands are being very brave and how they're taking back control of media, which is exciting, thought-provoking, and potentially a woo moment. Okay, so without further ado, let me welcome to the stage our three speakers. I think we are ready to roll. Just a few technical adjustments. In the meantime, I'll let you know that after this, you'll all be pleased to know that we have the Spotify Happy Hour drinks, where thanks to Spotify, you can all enjoy a beverage, a nice cold beverage. Okay, so we are ready to roll. So let's welcome to the stage the man who is going to chair and lead this discussion. It is David Indo, co-founder and CEO of IDComs.
Thank you very much, Jeremy.
Thank you.
Buonasera, Roma. Good afternoon, Festival of Media. It is a great pleasure to be here in front of you to talk about change in media, because I consider it to be a wonderful privilege to be part of our great industry at a time of absolute unprecedented change. Over the last couple of years, the trade bodies have done a quite remarkable job in facilitating a change in narrative. The ANA and the WFA, amongst others, have challenged and encouraged the marketing community, many of which are in this room today, to take a closer look at media. And the result has been really, really positive. Marketeers have re-engaged and reasserted control over their contracts, over their data. They've re-looked at the value supply chain, and they've made media more accountable. But ultimately, they have taken greater control and leadership internally of media governance, media decision-making, and the control and management of their agency partners. The language these advertisers are using, the way that they are speaking, is around control. But they're all doing it very differently. Procter & Gamble are reordering their entire agency roster and looking to take smarter, more informed decision-making internally to reduce the wastage of their supply chain. Royal Bank of Scotland and Anheuser-Busch AB InBev are actively exploring how to take disciplines internally and use better expertise internally to drive their challenging growth targets. Duracell, since their sale from Procter & Gamble, realized that they needed to reorder and reorganize their operating model to make it more effective. And as a consequence, are using 40% fewer agency partners than they were before. These are just a few examples of advertisers that are taking control. But what's interesting, and what this illustrates, is that this is a progression of control. This is not a binary thing, and it certainly doesn't mean in-housing. What I'd like to do very briefly is take you through how we look at a progression of control. We refer to it as the 5 states of media control. Firstly, there is pre-consolidation. These are advertisers generally that are very decentralized, that perhaps lack internal media governance, that use lots of agencies, and that perhaps still over-rely on their agency partners to make decisions for them. This is generally where we see these brands exhibiting the least amount of control. Next is consolidation. This is where advertisers consolidate their spend, work with fewer agencies in order to benefit from the aggregated scale of the network companies and the big holding groups. There is an element of control within this, but it is driven by procurement generally and focused on cost savings. There is a danger that this state leads to a race to the bottom. Mediapalooza in 2015 perhaps was the perfect manifestation of this state. Then we get into post-consolidation. This is where there is a change of narrative internally, where media becomes less of a focus on costs and begins more of a proposition around value. This is where marketeers are looking to leverage greater effectiveness in addition to controlling efficiency. These advertisers see media as a lever for growth, and they hold media to a higher standard of KPI. Many of the reviews that are going on this year will be focused around there. Then we've got fragmentation of scope. These advertisers understand the media management process and are able to clearly segment and distinguish between each of the disciplines within that process, and then are able to go to market and identify best-in-class providers within those sectors. And then finally, in-housing. There are typically two types of businesses that look to in-house. Firstly, it is those high-performance digital businesses, okay, that have organically grown their marketing organizations to act as in-house agencies. And then there are those businesses that are evolving their capabilities generally around programmatic, e-commerce, and growingly, strategy. Levels of progression of control, the 5 states of media control. 2 businesses that are actively on this progression are Deutsche Telekom and LVMH. With me today, I have 2 international media leaders that are leading that charge and driving that change. Firstly, Gerhard Louw from Deutsche Telekom, and then Sarah Armitage from LVMH will provide you with a unique insight into their respective journeys. Gerhard.
Thank you, David. Thanks for this opportunity to be here today and talk a little bit about our media operating model, MOM for short. Who are we? One slide. It's not going to be a selling presentation. Europe's largest telecommunications company, 73 billion euros in revenue. We have 13 European markets, or NetCos we call them, national companies that basically make the money, right? And these are the P&Ls that we work with, the companies in the local markets with the customers. And we are the most valuable telco brand in Europe, I have to add. So where do we take our mandate from? David was talking about taking charge. Our CEO is very clear about his vision for defending our leadership position in Europe and expanding that. And he says the raw material of this revolution, I think you can all understand what revolution this is about, is data. And we're making the data usable. And we need to be more in control. That was enough for us as the media organization to say, we need to be more in control. And what does that look like? This is maybe not completely new. I'd like to show a slide from 2014, actually, when we started saying we need to take control of our tech stack, firstly. We need to take control of the way our data related to advertising is managed. So more than 4 years ago, we created this blueprint, and the principles are as relevant today as they were in 2014. Full data access, full data ownership, strict safety and security rules. I think we underestimated it in 2014, how important that would become, and choosing and contracting the partner or supplier directly. We took the relationship away. We took control of the relationships within our tech stack. We defined the tech stack and chose our partners, and we've been running that since 2014. At the end of 2016, we decided to expand on this concept, not just taking control of the data and the technology, but take control of the entire media process. And what we did is we defined our media operating model. We defined 5 lots. This relates directly to what David was saying, fragmentation of scope. You can clearly see it's about the media process, and saying these are the 5 components that we see within the overall process, and these are the areas that we want to take control of. It doesn't mean insourcing, it means taking control. Let me give you an example. Media analytics, lot A2, is one of those areas that we buy. So you can see the build and buy concept. So we chose partners within that space that run media mix modeling, multi-touch attribution modeling, and the conversion of those two. So a very clear part of the buy concept. But that is a crucial input and a very important part to be able to run media strategy, to run media budgets. The question always is, where should I spend money and how much in which channel? You can only answer that with a lot of data and a lot of analytics, and we can do that. And that is the role of A1. So this is not only about choosing partners, it is also about saying, how are we as an organization doing this? How are we managing the control? What control are we taking? And that was the role of A1. So there's a build component, building internal competency around media strategy and management of the operating model, and there's a buy component with the other partners in lots A2, B, C, and D. So that's the model. You might think crazy. You might think very ambitious. What is the reason behind it? What are we trying to achieve with this media operating model? I think it's fairly clear, right? In-house capability building, especially in the areas of media strategy, analytics, and digitization. Increased transparency. I'm sure that word has fallen a few times today. I would also add the word media neutrality in the concept of transparency. In-house control over technology and data. I think that's clear. And also data-driven results management. So it is about more efficiency, but it is even more about more effectiveness. And we can only do this in this integrated model, we believe. So where are we today? Just a month ago, we announced that all the partners within this model has been chosen, has been contracted through very robust and laborious RFP, RFQ processes. You all know the story. And these are the partners that we have chosen to work with us in this model. You can see their logos there, and I'm happy to share their names with you as well. So, it's early days. You saw April, we announced the partners. We're now starting to work together. What are the challenges that we've identified so far in operating this model? Firstly, the first one is collaboration. It's clear, right? The more partners you have, the more control you want to exercise, the more important it is to get people to work together, processes to work together. And the other challenge, I would say, that we have is also building this in-house competence. You saw this idea of build. So build an in-house team, expand the in-house team, have the right competency to manage the model and the processes and the data and technology behind it. So how are we doing that? In collaboration, we spend a lot of time and a lot of effort working on what does collaboration really mean. We defined a common language and common behaviors. How do we want our partners to work with us? What is the behavior that they need to exercise in a collaborative way, in a collaboration model? We have a common measurement framework, very important, of course, also contractually agreed in terms of how the partners will be remunerated as part of the total remuneration. Collaboration is a very important component. And of course, in the end, it's all about the nuts and bolts, right? It is about the processes, it is about who's doing what, it is about handover points, it is about documents, it's about inputs and outputs. So there's a lot of work that we're doing at the moment to define that. On the second point, around this role of A1, media strategy and steering, there's a lot of topics and a lot of challenges as well. One of the topics, of course, is what does the central role do? What happens in the local businesses? We're a very decentralized business, so the local businesses have media people as well. So what are those roles and responsibilities? And we're working on very clear job descriptions there. New resources, you can imagine, this also requires a different kind of media manager, a different kind of in-house digital specialist, a different kind of media analytics person. So it's also the challenge to find the right and the best people. And I think in our business and in many of yours as well, this big challenge of getting the silos to work together. So in the end, there's always organizational structures behind these lovely charts, and in the end, it's about people inside the organization that work together, who work together on briefs, who work together on KPIs, who work together on processes. So that's our journey in a very short summary, and I thank you very much for listening, and over to Sarah.
Thank you, Gerhard. Now, I may work in luxury, but I have never, ever presented on a catwalk before, so please bear with me. I think I might just swivel somewhere in the middle. It's actually quite rare that I actually speak at industry events, not necessarily because at LVMH we're discreet. We are very discreet, so I won't give away too many figures this afternoon, but also because I do believe that luxury has not necessarily always been synonymous with some of the very serious issues that we're actually facing today in the industry. So I hope I'll be able to change your opinion about that in the next few slides. Just one slide. Who are we? Well, LVMH is Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, a successful luxury goods company. We actually represent 70 maisons, which is our word for brands or houses, across 6 different sectors: fashion and leather goods, perfumes and cosmetics, watches and jewelry, wines and spirits, and selective retailing. I'm sure that you know many of the brands on this list, brands that have actually produced products that are firmly anchored in heritage, but also engaged in modernity. And I think you've probably seen that with the announcement of some of the new creators within the brands, but also collaborations between Vuitton and brands such as Supreme, that we are firmly looking towards the future. I really love this quote from David Ogilvy. We talk a lot about brands at LVMH. And every ad is an investment in the long-term image of a brand. I think we can say that advertising and media have been key in actually creating what the LVMH brands are today. But it's getting more and more complicated. When I first joined this organization 4 years ago, it was actually still quite easy. We were spending a lot of our money in print, outdoor, or TV. Today, if we consider that there are 21 points of contact before a luxury item purchase, my job is changing today because we need to try and understand what is the interplay between those different points of contact and what is the contribution of each of those points of contact, both in short-term but also in long-term metrics. Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. This is a very old quote. But I know that within our organization, this is really keeping a lot of our presidents up at night. As we spend more of our money in digital, it's even more difficult to know how is that contributing to the success of our brands. So measurement is absolutely key. One thing that we're very keen to address within LVMH is to make sure that the brands aren't looking at the lower funnel metrics. It's so easy to look at click-through rates and be obsessed by click-through rates. We need to really think about how all the different contact points are actually interplaying to actually really work in developing the brand in terms of long-term and short-term. And I really like this quote from Comscore. Clicks on ads are at best incomplete and at worst misleading. We have a big education job to be done within the brands working in the group. So our role is actually changing. Our role is very, very different to the role of Gerhard. I am not in charge of the strategy of the different brands. Each brand is responsible for its own strategy. We are a back office, which is there to enable and empower the different brands in the organization to extract the best value out of the media supply chain. And our job used to be about purely consolidation. We have 70 brands. If we pool the investment from 70 brands, obviously we have more clout to negotiate. And it used to be just about cost and quality with regards to positions. I don't think that media has ever been a commodity at LVMH. You know, value and quality has always been very important. So, digital is driving a whole new suite of needs. So, yes, we continue to negotiate for the group, but it's not just now about cost or positions. It's also about extra value, and notably innovation. How can we extract more innovation from our media partners? Agencies, we're not just managing agencies, we're actually looking to review our agencies and third partners to really make sure that we have the partners that are going to be able to accompany us the best in terms of operational excellence, but also strategic input. Expert media consult, education, thought leadership. I'm going to come on to talk more about this later on because I think this is where we have an awful lot to do within the group. And two other areas, strengthening media measurement, analytics and data capabilities as we take more things back in-house, and all that by really pushing to make sure that we work within a safe and transparent media supply chain. So I think you've probably heard this as a major theme throughout the day today. So we're taking back control. We're at the beginning of the journey. We're not as far ahead as Gerhard, but there is a real desire within the LVMH group to make sure that we actually control all the 5 areas that I actually just showed to you. So what are we doing about viewability and measurement? Measure what matters. We're actually fixing viewability standards in all our markets, with all our agencies. We're looking to see how technology can add value to the group. So we're actually internalizing our contracts around ad tech, and we're continuing to push our partners. Brand safety and ad fraud. We're implementing tools, so we're actually looking to audit our third-party partners in this space. Setting the rules around programmatic. We actually developed a programmatic framework a couple of years ago, and now we're actually looking to audit that supply chain. And constantly talking to partners and industry leaders to make sure that we're implementing industry best practice. And sharing outside of the luxury industry, to us, is absolutely critical. And lastly, transparency. We've been very active in transparency over the last year. We've been working on financial audits with our agencies. We're also working on a global MSA with all our agency partners. And we're looking to transform the partnership that we do have with our agencies. And partnership to us is important, and it's a two-way street. And we want to make sure that we continue to create lasting partnerships with our agencies, but based on a transparent and a trusting basis. And last but not least, I think this is where we're actually really bringing value to the group today, because we need to make sure that we group all our stakeholders within the brands that are operating media together to make sure that we keep our competitive advantage. So we've created what we call a media council, where we're actually going to be inviting all the chief media directors of the different brands in the different markets around the table to discuss together what matters so that we can actually share best practice together, but also deliver trainings in terms of filling the gaps. So we're going to invite all the maisons to participate in our media community so they can champion best practice, but also enhance everybody's media capabilities, and to provide the maison with best-in-class media capabilities to serve the marketing efforts. So concretely, we're actually working with our partner consultant to deliver white papers in terms of how to get the most out of our media ecosystem. And we're also working on training, not training manuals, because I don't know about you, but the number of newsletters or training manuals that I see in my inbox that just disappear down the box and get thrown into the bin. So we need to try and make an education program which is tailored to the different levels within the organization to make sure that it really brings them value and just doesn't sit in the inbox. And I think value is my last slide, because my department is about bringing value to the group to make sure that we can continue and maintain our competitive advantage for each individual maison and for the LVMH group in general. And that's it. Thank you.
We have 7 minutes left. And I'm very conscious that we stand between you and drinks out there and probably a very beautiful pasta evening dinner. So I have a few questions, but I think it might make a little bit more sense given what we've seen from two very progressive advertisers that are actively taking control and leading internally high-level media governance practices, if there are any questions initially from the floor. Anybody?
Come on.
Well, maybe I shall provoke. Shall I start? And then we'll see whether we can get some questions out of the floor. You both are approaching this area of control in different ways because you have very different businesses.
Yeah.
The one similarity I find with both companies, having obviously worked with both of you, is that you are central functions without a clear mandate. Mm-hmm. So you have very autonomous NatCos, 13 of them. Sarah, you look after 70 autonomous maisons.
Absolutely.
Yet you have a very clear vision for what needs to be done to improve media. How do you manage that process without it becoming the lowest common denominator and raising everything to the highest common denominator? Gerhard, please, and then Sarah.
Yeah, I think what is interesting, of course, working with so many markets that are so different in size, in scope, but also in maturity and using data and technology, or more or less. What we have is we built clusters. So within the 13 markets, we have 3 clusters. And yes, it is a little bit sort of you are better than, cluster 1 is better than cluster 2, which is better than cluster 3. But I think we have the relationship with the markets to know why they are in the cluster that they are. And what we've always tried to do is to create a vision for everyone. So the vision is not the same for cluster 1, 2, and 3, so they're slightly different. Of course, the vision that I showed is always based on the most advanced markets, but there's let's say, similar vision also for the other markets. So we're not trying to say a market that is very small and maybe not as sophisticated, that they should be doing the same, that they're very big, sophisticated markets. So I think it's important to have very good knowledge of the local markets and understand where they are, and also have their trust and their cooperation, of course.
Very good. Sarah?
Yeah, I think trust is really important. I think lowest common denominator doesn't even come into it. The idea is to raise the bar.
Yeah.
So, the whole education program that we're putting into place and the media committee is to be a forum for people to actually discuss quite openly where they have gaps, and to make sure that we train the organisation to make sure that we're all best in class at everybody's level. We have more sophisticated brands than others, but the idea is to raise everybody up, not to put everybody down.
Very good. Thank you very much, both of you. Any questions from the audience now?
Thank you for great presentations. I was wondering, when you did the change within your media structure, where did you draw the line between being in-house and buying the services?
You're asking me?
Yes.
I think just to explain the model once more, the model is not about doing the work in-house. So let's say when we talk about actually doing the analytical models, for example, executing the media mix modeling, or when we talk about executing a programmatic campaign, the work doesn't get done in-house, it gets done by partners, the partners that we have in the model. But what we are saying is that we need to understand, we need to take control of that process. So what do you need? You need more specialists also within the head office and even in the markets, of course, to be able to control the partners, manage the partners, work much closer with the partners. So I think it's not an insourcing model. It is definitely the fragmentation of scope. Having said that, there are some markets that are doing more and more elements in-house. It mainly starts with search. It then goes on to Facebook, for example. So we have one platform, quite a big part of the spend goes into these platforms. So then if you have a smaller market, 2 or 3 people within the organization, then search experts are doing that. But the strategy behind the model is not an insourcing strategy. It is a control strategy. Yeah. But you're right, the borders isn't always clear and things change. We have some sort of interesting things happening in our markets. In Hungary, we had a law a few years ago that changed the entire media setup. So there's more in-housing there. There are other markets that have other ambitions. So, in a decentralized model, of course, markets don't always do exactly the same. But the model is not about in-housing. Yeah.
Any more? One.
Thank you very much, all. That was very interesting, fascinating. So obviously the theme was very much on taking back control. And I was curious for both Sarah and Gerhard, what presented the impetus to sort of undertake this effort, one? And then the second question is, if you could go back to the beginning and start over again, what would you do differently?
Good questions.
It's easy for me because I am at the beginning. I think what provoked it, I think it's pretty evident. For the last 2 years, there have been increasing a number of issues on the table. Our digital spends have increased significantly. We need to really make sure that we're pulling value out of the whole sort of media supply chain. And we need to educate people within the brands that aren't necessarily media specialists. So we have to do this now if we're going to continue to keep our competitive advantage for the long term.
I'll answer the second part of the question first. I wouldn't run 5 pitches simultaneously. I think when we defined the process for choosing the partners, so the model was defined first, and it was a very clear vision within our group to implement that model. And then we started looking at sort of timing and thinking, how long will it take? And then it actually dawned on us that this is going to be 5 separate pitches, plus an internal restructuring and an internal change, all at the same time. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend running so many pitches at the same time, but we did it, and I'm very glad that phase is over. And what provoked it, I think I agree with Sarah. I mean, we don't need to say it out loud, right? So there's a big trust issue in our industry. I think there's a lot of problems, and I won't go into them now, but I think this was one of the main issues that we said, we're not just going to do a media pitch which everyone starts off saying, oh, we're going to do a different media pitch this time. We're going to focus on strategy and people. And then guess what? 2-3 months later, it's all about price, right? So I think we've all been in that situation. So we didn't want to go that way. So we said, let's not even talk about a pitch. Let's look at our business and let's look at how we want to manage it and how we want to go forward, and try and also work on some of the issues that we have in the industry that this conference is all about.
Brilliant. Well, ladies and gentlemen, will you please join me in thanking Sarah Armitage and Gerhard Louw?
Thank you.